Imagine the worst, most stereotypical mother-in-law. Unfortunately, that's exactly what I got. My mother-in-law is a very peculiar woman who has a lot of free time on her hands. She spends this time prying into places where she is not asked for her expert opinion. I can't imagine how her husband puts up with her, but maybe she is a different person in the family. In her mother-in-law's mind, a woman is first of all a hostess and a mother, and only then a human being. She never worked, and earning money was always her husband's job, and he did it well. She gave her whole life to her son and daughter. After they grew up, she found no better solution than to sit with her grandchildren all the time and teach life to me and my son-in-law. Her daughter took on her mother's personality and is now on her third maternity leave. Well, my son went down the wrong path and married me. In turn, I do not understand this value system at all. My mother-in-law probably did not live a minute for herself. I wouldn't want to spend all my personal time cleaning, cooking, scrubbing floors, etc. My husband totally agrees and doesn't make me scrub the whole apartment unnecessarily and doesn't make me the keeper of the household. My husband and I are working and always looking for something new. Now we're investing more in emotions, so there's something to remember. The two of us travel, go to various events and concerts, and sometimes allow ourselves an expensive restaurant. At home, we don't worship soup and cutlets. So we live happily, and no one complains. My mother-in-law is always prying with her advice that we need children, and in general it's time to live like adults. She is always complaining about how irresponsible and stupid we are. Her attempts to zombify my son were unsuccessful, and my husband said that if this happened again, he would stop talking to her. Since then, there have been no more attempts at brainwashing. My mother-in-law then decided to switch from her son to me. Now I am under the oppression of endless advice, and I try to endure it. Usually it ends with me complaining to my husband, who puts my mother in her place and promises that we will stop communicating with her. She calms down, but then she starts up again, and I don't want to have regular fights between them and try to ignore her for as long as possible. This last situation just blew my mind. It seems to me that she has senile marasmus, because there is no other way to explain the situation. In the evening after work, I had an incredibly bad side pain. We called an ambulance, who said it was appendicitis. Grinning with pain, they took me to the hospital and successfully operated on me there. My condition at the time was terrible, and then I got an unexpected call from my mother-in-law. I knew she was calling for a reason and didn't want to answer the phone. Thinking that maybe she was worried about me, I decided to answer the phone. From the first seconds, she started yelling at me and making accusations. In her opinion, I was just lying there doing nothing, and my husband was now sitting and starving because I hadn't cooked for him. In a state of complete shock, I listened to all the dirt about me. It felt like I had flown off to Hawaii, leaving a small child at home. But in fact, there was a big man at home who could order himself something or go out if necessary. I think it's unlikely he would have starved to death, but in my mother-in-law's opinion, he was on the verge of it. After the call, I lay staring at the ceiling. The thought abruptly flashed through my mind. How does she know what's in our refrigerator? I grabbed the phone with a jerk and, already pretentious, called my husband. Before he could say anything, I had already told him the whole story and asked him how she knew that he was on the brink of starvation. He was puzzled, but started the story from the beginning. The day after I went to the hospital, our washing machine broke. At home, he only sleeps and works most of the time, and he called a handyman. Since he wouldn't be home, he had to ask his mother to meet the worker. Before that, he finished all the food from the fridge, and now he goes to the cafe without suspecting anything. The husband didn't even think it would come out in this situation, but I knew that she had inspected the entire apartment, every nook and cranny and shelf. My mother-in-law had clearly decided that I was a terrible hostess, and now I needed to be terrorized. I could not stand it and blocked my mother-in-law everywhere I could. I explained to my husband that I did not want to see her anymore, much less hear her. My husband agreed with my point of view, because she had already crossed the line. That's how she ruined a thin world with one phone call. Let her now reap the fruits of her actions.
Story 2.
We are very busy right now, and my husband and I decided to ask my mother-in-law to babysit our kids for a while. She refused, saying that she had raised her children and that was enough for her. I didn't understand that statement, since they were her own blood and she didn't care. We have 2 children, one is 4 years old and the other is 1 year old. Such a small difference embarrassed us a bit, but many of my friends have an even smaller age difference in their children. We thought it would be better to be difficult in the beginning, but then we would have peace of mind. I hoped that my mother-in-law would help me and my kids in a difficult time. My husband told me right away that she didn't love children and would deny us the idea. I did not believe it, because a woman who had raised 2 children should have at least a little bit of love. As it turned out, my husband was telling the truth. I had to take my youngest to a doctor's appointment, and I had no one to leave the other with. I asked my mother-in-law, but she refused, saying that she had urgent business. Later, it turned out that she went to yoga and just did not want to help. I had to reschedule the appointment to a time that would be convenient to my husband. This caused a lot of frustration and inconvenience. I'm sorry that my mom lives in another city and can't help us. Besides, she keeps a small household. Knowing her well, if she were around, she would never say no to us. Attempts to discuss the subject with my husband were unsuccessful. He insisted that it was useless to talk to her about it. His mother had not given him and his brother the attention they deserved, and she had no interest in taking care of her grandchildren. My husband and I talked frankly, and I learned a lot. My mother-in-law only cared about the children in the obligatory aspects: food, sleep, education, health. There was no support and love between them. Conversations were also rare. I could not understand it, as a mother of 2 children cannot be so heartless. I thought my husband was exaggerating, because my mother-in-law is very cultured and does not drink alcohol. Recently passing by her house, I decided to call and ask to visit her. With difficulty she agreed. On the doorstep I noticed her displeased face. We sat there for about an hour, talked. She was constantly expressing her displeasure in the direction of her eldest. Children of that age are very mobile and didn't want to stand at attention, as she wanted them to. The 2 of us sat in the kitchen drinking tea. I decided to started talking about how I needed help. It was very difficult to cope with 2 small children. After listening to me, she went on the attack. In my time I raised 2 and it was much harder. No one ever helped me. I had to do everything myself. Your children, first and foremost, are your concern. Now I'm tired, I need to rest, live for myself. Again, I was perplexed. I asked, "Then why have 2 children if you don't need it?" She sassed me, said it's none of my business. Already at home, I analyzed the whole situation, but still I did not understand anything. A mother of 2 children, but does not love them. How is it possible? What do you think, what to do in this situation, and whether she will be able to love her grandchildren?
It would be great if you liked our stories, and if you would like to give us your generous likes, that would be just great.